Hey Ed.
Welcome to my shop, Paul.
Ed is my next door neighbor, and his shop is a little bit different than mine. It's much more organized, but he has this great blasting cabinet over here. He does all the blasting work and cleaning work for me, and he's really into restoring cool Nortons. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. Check.
For sale, by the way.
Is it for sale?
It's for sale. Everything's for sale.
Look at that. Did you get this decal made, or is that...
So what I did is I had a stick-on strip with a stencil on it. Transferred the stencil on it and basically put that on there, sprayed the gold over the base green, removed the stencil, and then clear coated over the whole thing.
Wow. It's a beauty. Well, anyway, he blasted my cases, and this is what they look like on that job. They're all ready to go. We're going to do some finish work on them. And that's it. Thanks, Ed.
See you, Paul. Good luck.
Now look at this. How nice. And nothing like mine. So this transmission that I'm working on was one that I did a video quite a few months ago on the GL4, GL5 oils. It was a transmission that ran low on oil and seized up the second and third speed gears onto the main shaft. They were literally welded to the main shaft, and then the transmission exploded, the gears broke, the input shaft broke, the counter gear broke. So we had a mess of gears. And when you get something that's that bad, you just have to go through it and change everything brand new. So the case was repaired. It was blasted at Ed's shop next door. And now I'm going to show you the process of how I kind of clean that case up, detail it, and then put the unit together. Let's get to it. So let me give you a close-up of the case. It's been blasted, and then I go over the case with some steel wool to kind of knock down the raised metal that the blasting causes, just to give it a little bit of a sheen, okay? So when I got the case back from blasting, it looks very dull, like this tail housing. You see how dull the tail housing looks. And if you go over the tail housing with some steel wool, you will actually break down the metal a bit and give it a little bit of a sheen. This looks very blasted right now. It doesn't look natural. This looks more like how the transmission would come out of the car. So a little stain, I'll leave the stains in there. And the other thing is I go through all the holes here, okay, and I chase them with a tap. And the reason why you want to go through all the holes and chase them with a tap is to make sure that, number one, the threads are going to be good, and also you want to make sure that the threads aren't deformed, because over the years these threads are going to all be deformed from use. So running a tap through them will actually straighten the threads out a bit and, you know, kind of restore them. If they're not pulled out, you'll be able to check. You can kind of then visually see that all the threads are in good shape and there's no problem. Now this case was bushed. You can see the bushing here. My friend Steve does the bushing work. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. The case is sized for the counter shaft in both the front and in the back, okay? So you've got a new bushing in there, and that realigns the centers of the case. Remember, this transmission had a tremendous explosion, so it needed to be addressed and fixed. So the case is all realigned. All the threads are in excellent condition. It's all been cleaned up, faced, and ready to get a new gear set installed in it. It's also been drilled for a drain plug as well. Let's see if we could see inside here. If you look in the inside here, you'll see that it's got a little bit of cleanup here. And what happens is the standard national pipe thread, the 1/2-inch national pipe thread that the factory uses, is a slightly different pitch. So if you want to use factory plugs, you have to kind of drill these holes a little bit deeper for clearance, okay? So everything again is chased and cleaned up. It looks really good. I've also treated the side cover the same way. It's been blasted and then gone over with some steel wool to kind of knock down the raised metal to give it a little bit of a sheen to it. So it gives it that natural look. And this hole over here that's threaded is for the transmission controlled spark switch, which is broken, and nobody really uses that anymore. So I have these plugs that I use that will get screwed in here to basically block off the TCS switch. It's a nice O-ring type plug, fits in there like this. Looks really sharp and low profile and pretty trick looking. Again, if we look at the tail, we can see how it doesn't quite look right. So what I'm going to do with this tail housing now is go ahead and clean it up. And we've got one bad hole over here that we're going to have to helicoil and fix. There's a completely stripped hole over here, so we'll helicoil that. This one looks pretty good shape, and we'll do the same treatment to the tail. When you're using any tap, you want to go forward and then go back and break the chip. This way you don't clog up the tap and snap it. Even though this is aluminum, you could still clog up the tap. I also use this stuff called Tap Magic cutting fluid. It's available in any machine, tool supply place. Go back and forth. Keep on working this. The problem with using these types of conventional handles for taps is that they get in the way of the tail housing. So this works just as fine. A little bit more time consuming, but it works fine. You just got to make sure everything is square as it's going through everything. That's why you want to drill the pilot hole correctly so it works right. See a little old junk in it. The threaded insert has a drive tang in it, and there's a tool that you're supposed to have, but I just ground a flat and a bolt at the end of the bolt so that when the insert is screwed into the bolt, the flat will grab it like this and it'll drive it into the case. So that's what I do. You lose your tools, you got to make do with something. And I'm just have the hole well lubricated so that the insert goes in without hanging up, and the bolt is going to drive the insert into the extension housing. So once I get it below the surface where I like it, I'll just remove the bolt. That looks really nice. So with this punch, I'm going to simply knock the drive tang out of the insert. So you can see the nice thread repair now. Okay, so what I've done is I've cleaned the whole case up and went over with the steel wool. And you can see here how the tail housing looks now. It looks nice and clean, a little bit, has that little bit of a luster to it that I like. And again, this is by using the steel wool over the blasted surface. It doesn't give it that kind of scraped look. It just kind of brings a little bit luster into the aluminum. I think without taking away from the original look. You could use, again, soda blasting is probably the best method, but we didn't have soda blasting set up in the booth next door, so this is what we used. I've cleaned the threads out and tapped them, and I also have a trick where I countersink these threads, so at least when they're putting in a new mounting plate, it's going to find its way into the thread without stripping it. I've chased all the threads on the extension housing, cleaned it up, and of course helicoiled that one section over here. So now what I'm going to do is use one of these billet aluminum mid plates I make. His plate was kind of sloppy, and this plate looks exactly like the factory plate, but it's beefier. It's got a little bit more girth over here, and has a hole over here so that you can bolt the counter shaft through it. So I use these extended fit counter shafts. They fit the cases better than any other counter shaft on the market. I've designed them. They're a little bit longer in the front, and they bolt to these mid plates that I make in the back. They get a little bit wider step on them as well, so if you're using it in a factory application, it won't have a tendency to push forward and rotate out of the case. That's why I use them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply pre-fit everything first. These plates have a standard 5/16 dowel on them, so you have to open the holes in the case and in the tail, this little dowel hole over here. You have to open it to a 5/16 diameter hole so that the dowel pin fits correctly. That's the only mod you have to make to the case and the tail for these things to work. So what I'm going to do is I'll take that plate and lay it on here without a gasket. These fit a little tighter than the factory plates, which is nice because they'll register better in the board case. I'm using a rubber mallet. And by doing this, I can feel if it's moving around. I can look around and see that it's fitting nice and flush. So I'm not seeing any air in between anything. I do the same thing with the extension housing. I think it's going to look pretty trick. It looks really good. Again, I'm checking to see if I see any air, if anything has popped up on one side. Looks really good. Okay, so now that I've got that case cleaned up and all the threaded holes in the main case and in the extension housing repaired, chased, cleaned up, let me show you the parts now that I'm going to put inside this transmission, and then we'll get to putting the whole thing together. Okay, so this is what I got on deck. I've got a brand new main shaft. This is actually the light main shaft that a rifle drilled. Reverse gears, in other words, forward idler, rear idler, reverse gear, new shift forks, first, second, third, counter gear, input shaft. This gear set itself is an M22W gear set. It's a 10-spline gear set, so it's a direct replacement for the gear set that came with that car. It's got the threaded nut. It'll be a complete exact replacement. Billet aluminum midplate, zero rock synchronizer assemblies. These are matched hub and slider assemblies. Extended fit counter shaft. And of course over here I've got the case that's been refurbished, tail housing, and side cover. Got all this stuff going to go together right now. Get this baby going. I forgot to mention I'm also putting in a new design first gear sleeve. The old sleeve was messed up from the seizure. These new sleeves have dynamic feed oiling grooves, but also have a trough in the middle for oil to pool and circulate properly. A lot of the other sleeves on the market just kind of have the diagonal groove in it, and it works okay, but it acts more as a wiping action rather than a pooling, flowing action, what I want to see on these types of sleeves. This is the factory had a kind of a recess in the sleeve, and I really feel like that's really important to have that. So I redesigned these sleeves. They have the nice square shoulder rather than these ridiculously tapered shoulders that sometimes can interfere with the taper of bearings. So they give maximum support compared to other sleeves, and they work quite well. All right, so as you can see, I'm working on getting this gear set together, heating up the speedometer gear, sliding it into place. I cool it down with some oil. See, we got that billet midplate on here. First and second gear. 1-2 synchronizer assembly. Going to put the third gear on there now. I actually use light oil on the gear train. I use ATF fluid sometimes because I want to make sure it spins nice and easy, and sometimes if I use a thick gear lube underneath here, I'm not going to be able to feel things better. So that's a 3-4 match synchronizer assembly, zero rock assembly. It's all ready to go. Now when I say zero rock, these assemblies, they do have some rock to them, but they're not as severe as some of the poor assemblies you see on the internet and on eBay. Put the snap ring on. So now that that's on, one thing I just wanted to point out that I also deburr all the teeth of every gear, because a lot of times they got little dents and dings in them. And I use this Fordham flexible shaft here. It's got a little abrasive cutoff wheel on here, and I will get in here and do this to the gear teeth, obviously when they're not on the main shaft, but separately. And that gets rid of all little dents and dings of the teeth and makes the transmission just run so much smoother during braking. But everything feels really good. I'm going to put this gear train aside right now and work on putting the counter gear in the main case. One thing about these new Italian counter gears, whether you're getting an M20 replacement gear set or one of the M22 variants, is you no longer need this spacer tube. A lot of people ask me about that. The spacer tube goes in a lot of stock replacement counter gears, especially the ones made in Taiwan, or factory counter gears. The new gear sets actually have a step inside, as you can see, and that has it kind of built into it. It also adds more rigidity and a thicker wall to the counter gear, making it a little bit stronger. So it makes it easier to load needle bearings without having this tube flopping around inside of it. So it's really a cool little upgrade, nice little touch. So you can see I've got the red line gaskets in place, and the mid plate and counter shaft are bolted together with that new billet system. Just wanted to show you so far how things are coming along. So I've got a new bearing retainer on here with new lock straps and new bolts. The reason why I put new bolts is because I like to use 1-inch bolts as opposed to 3/4-inch bolts that they use on the factory retainers. These 3/4-inch bolts don't make full contact with the threads in the case. So even though the threads were nice and clean, using a longer bolt to get more thread surface is a much better idea. Now also you could see the bushing job that was done in the case and how nicely it was done, and how the extended fit counter shaft fits nice and flush with the front of the case. So here you can see the new M22W gear set installed. You can see I've got a 10-spline input shaft in the front of this, and beautiful M22W set. New zero rock synchronizer assemblies, completely new. Spins beautiful, this box, with the case rebushed. Nice backlash actually between the gears. They feel really good, really solid. It's got great alignment. It's going to come out really nice. I can't wait to see how this thing sounds and feels driving in this car. Okay, I'd like to say a few things about side cover assemblies for the Muncies. This cover is in really great shape. It doesn't have any cracks. Nice and smooth after it was blasted. I put a little bit of a sheen on it with the steel wool. Looks really good. And what we're going to do is plug the TCS switch hole up with one of my TCS switch plugs. It's got an O-ring plug. It'll go in here like this, okay? The other thing is I want to talk about these shifter shafts. These are the latest style bolt-on style shafts. They seem to be very brittle. They always tend to crack over here. They have little cracks. I don't know if you could see that. They tend to chip away. The other thing that I don't like about them is because they have this kind of D-shaped hole to it, the drive of this particular shifter shaft is on these little pointy edges of the D drive. So what they tend to do is they tend to crack. What they do is they tend to crack right over here. Usually they'll split like this or like this. This is a powdered metal piece. It's not steel. So I really don't like using these. But then, again, sometimes people want the original stuff. But unfortunately, this is not going to work. So another problem with these side covers is that they wear the bores out because they're aluminum. And these particular shifter shafts are not 750 thousandths in diameter, but about 748 thousandths. So if I put this shifter shaft in this cover, so you can see how much this cover is worn. So what will happen is no matter, even if you put new seals in it, eventually it's going to leak. So to fix this is to use these new steel billet shifter shafts. They come keyed with the small keyway for the stud type shifter shafts, but they're adapters that you can use. They work fine. These are hardened steel billet shafts, and you can see that they're TIG welded 360 degrees around, so there's no chance of them breaking compared to these. So they're actually a little bit lightweight and less prone to breakage, you see? And the other thing is because these are 750 thousandths, we're going to be able to restore the bore and actually give a better sealing surface for the seal to work as well. To restore the bore, I'll be using this 751 thousandths reamer. So we'll get 1 thousandths clearance between this and the bore, and we're going to have a nice tight fit again. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put some of this Tap Magic stuff in the bore. Going to start the reamer in the bore. This, look, it's almost already worn. So we got a little bit of resistance here. Doesn't take much to clean the bore up. And you can see now we can put the oversized shifter shaft in here. Have a nice tight fit, no up and down movement. Be really nice. One thing you also want to do is put some anaerobic sealant on these pivot pins for the cover. They have a tendency to get loose sometimes. This pin fits sort of tight, but we don't want to get leaks through the cover. So this kind of gives it a little bit more strength, as well as some sealing. And clean it up. So also when I'm assembling these transmissions, if you put the scissors in, you'll notice that sometimes there's a gap between the retaining ring groove and the scissors. So the scissors can move quite a bit. So I have these 30 thousandths shim washers that I put in there, and I think one will do the trick. And that'll also keep the scissors more uniform and more straight. It fits really good with this one shim. That's it. And then we're going to put a new 20-pound spring on this cover as well. So here's the transmission completely together with a new Hurst Competition Plus shifter for the 1970-72 Camaro setup. It's a good idea to show people how the shifter is installed, and I want you to notice that on the 70-72 Camaro setup, it's a little bit backwards. They want the adjuster on the reverse arm rather than on the shifter body itself, okay? So it's something a little bit different. But for reference, this is how the whole shifter setup works. Now, if you recall, I had to put in the new style universal billet steel shifter shafts, so I needed to put those adapters in place because to take up the slop, because this uses a normal bolt-on shifter shaft. The reverse shaft was fine, so we left that stock, but we added 2 new billet shifter shafts internally, reamed the cover out to fit them, so we used the little adapter clips to take up the space. This came out really nice. It looks good. Bottom side, you can see the billet center section. Now I add washers to the extension housing with the stock bolts because I really don't like running bolts directly against the aluminum. It really chews it up more. And here we have that little threaded insert that we repaired the extension housing with. And unfortunately, because the bolts were really rusted on the side cover, we had to go with some new bolts and little star washers over here just to keep them tight from falling off. The original tag is back in place. TCS switch plug is in place. And of course, the whole bush setup for the counter gear, the repair of the case, bushing it in the front and the back. You know, the reason why I took this job on was to show you some of the cool upgrades that are out there for the Muncie transmission now. And a lot of times in most of my videos, I've already gone through, you know, doing gear sets, loading needle bearings, so it's kind of like repetitive for me to be doing this over and over again. I think it would be boring for you. So what I try to do in these videos is, you know, just touch base on some of the new things. Like in this particular transmission, showing you how the case was bushed, for example, showing you a threaded repair to the extension housing, how I clean the case so it looks like an original aluminum case, and, you know, the little touches in putting the unit together, the different things that I do. And so in this particular unit, if you recall, it was a gutted transmission completely. This was the original gear set for it. It was all burnt out and melted together. My video on GL4, GL5 oils, which is listed on my list of videos, I'll post a card link above. And in that video, I showed you how the transmission came in all seized up and it was a complete meltdown. That's why this video is called Meltdown Part 2. So the final product was, again, the bush case, the new gear set, all the upgrades, and finally a new Hurst Competition Plus shifter with an installation kit for the 70-72 F-body Camaro Firebird platform, along with my hard steel bushings and clips. And that's the final product, and that's what it looked like. That's how it went out the door. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. See you soon. Thank you.